Bon jeudi à tous et à toutes. J'ouvre maintenant la séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 152 du Comité permanent de l'industrie et de la technologie.
Good morning, everyone. I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 152 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. And before we begin, I would like to ask all members and other in-person participants to consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. This is important for the health of our interpreters.
Of the House referring back the 20th report of the committee entitled Potential Anti-Competitive Behavior in Canada's e-transfer ecosystem. The committee is resuming its study on credit card practices and regulations in Canada, and we're pleased to have with us today from Stripe Inc. Patrick Collison, Chief Executive Officer and co-founder. Mr. Collison, thanks for joining us today, and without further ado, I yield the floor to you for about 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for the opportunity to speak before the committee today. My co-founder and brother, John, and I are originally from Dublin in Ireland. And when we founded our first company almost 20 years ago, we found that accepting payments online was clunky and tedious and required enormous amounts of arcane knowledge. And so that's why we started Stripe, to make it easier to adopt online payments and to simplify the process for both software developers and for small businesses. Stripe has operated in Canada for more than a decade. We just opened a new office in Toronto, and we have almost 350 employees across Canada. We compete energetically to help Canadian businesses grow and export and to manage their revenue. Stripe powers Canada's startups and small businesses, as well as some of the largest enterprises. And we're proud of our ability to support Canadian companies who have grown their payment volume on Stripe by more than 50% over the last 2 years. Now, competition in payments is a good thing, and we believe that we need more of it. Strong competition pushes all of us to innovate and benefits businesses and consumers. And I believe that there are key interconnected policy areas where this committee can help increase competition further, including payment alternatives and open banking policies. Canadian businesses will grow if they can offer their customers the payment methods of their choice, and competitive alternatives in the marketplace will foster innovation and better access. There are now hundreds of payment methods around the world, with more, it seems, popping up almost every day. And many of them are based on credit and debit cards, but there is a growing set of alternative payment methods, such as Pix in Brazil or UPI in India, that are affordable, convenient, and growing very quickly. These are bank-to-bank payment systems, and they're often built on a real-time payment infrastructure with a technology overlay that better connects businesses and consumers. And typically, this overlay is most successful when it is more open to innovators, and it's often policymakers who play a leading role in fostering these ecosystems. So we're optimistic and hopeful about Canada's real-time rail system, and to fully realize its benefits. We believe that policymakers should ensure broad access to this infrastructure and to deliver the rail to the market as soon as possible. We're supportive of the government's efforts to promote open banking. However, I will note that the decision not to include payment facilitation in Canada's open banking framework is a missed opportunity to foster new entrants and potentially better payment alternatives. We've seen in a number of jurisdictions that have moved more decisively on open banking, including the UK, Australia, and recently the United States. Open banking can help support bank-to-bank payment systems, which in turn increase competition, reduce costs, and enable innovation that here could benefit all Canadians. Finally, as policymakers consider different approaches to lowering the cost of card payments, we think it's important to preserve the ability for providers to offer flat rate pricing, which is critical for many businesses, especially small businesses, for two main reasons. The first is scalability. Standardized pricing is part of the reason modern payment systems are able to serve small businesses in large numbers, because the traditional kind of negotiated idiosyncratic model left many small businesses underserved. The costs of serving were too high. And then second, simplicity and predictability for the business. This is a very complicated space. There's a lot of different factors that go into payment processing costs, interchange fees, taxes, the whole gamut. And at the same time, there's been significant innovation with software that can dramatically improve payments. And as a result of optimizations that we've made, for example, businesses using Stripe's latest checkout suite saw an average revenue increase of 11.9%. And so these services go far beyond basic card processing, and they're included in our simple standard pricing, which has remained unchanged in Canada for 8 years, even as underlying costs have evolved and as the functionality that we offer has grown. Canadian businesses have well over 50 different payment options to choose from, running the full continuum on pricing and functionality. And we will endeavor to continue to compete vigorously to ensure that the market has the greatest possible choice. We believe in Canadian entrepreneurialism, and we're committed to helping grow the Canadian economy. We exist to serve the needs of Canadian businesses, both here and to help them operate around the world. And our success is inextricably linked to theirs. And so with that, I welcome your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And so to start the discussion, I'll turn it over to MP Rempel-Garner.
Thank you, Chair. This year, Visa and MasterCard reduced their interchange fees for Canadian small businesses. How much revenue has Stripe collected by not passing these savings from reduced interchange fees to Canadian small businesses?
Well, I want to kind of clarify part of the question there, where Stripe has two pricing models. We have a model where you can pay for payments costs in isolation, and then you can opt to pay for our software.
Mr. Coulson, sorry, there's an issue with your sound. It feels like maybe the microphone was disconnected or something. Try again.
Okay, is this working better?
Oh, it was for a second.
Interesting.
Okay, it's working now.
Okay. All good?
Okay. You can resume.
Okay, sorry about the trouble. So I just want to kind of clarify the question. Stripe has two
again, it seems like we lose you. I don't know if it's the connection that's.
Is this better?
This is better.
Okay. So I just want to clarify something in the question. Sorry about the trouble. Stripe has two pricing models, a model where you can pay directly for payments and then separately for our software services. And then we have a model where you can kind of pay as a package for all of our software products and payments together. If you pay for payments directly from Stripe, we passed.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Mr. Carlson, yes, Mr. Massey.
That's not correct. He's using the general speaker now. I'm worried about our interpreters.
They haven't flagged anything, Mr. Massey. The sound seems to be okay. I'm looking at the clerk. See, it looks like we're okay based on the interpreter's appraisal. Thank you, Mr. Massey.
Thank you, and Chair, I'm just going to avail myself of the opportunity here. Is it now back to my round?
It's back to your round. It was Mr. Carlson, but it's your time.
Thank you. So I think it's clear that Mr. Carlson won't answer my question on that. So are you tracking? So I won't ask if you're tracking the revenue. So I'm just going to go right into remedy. Has the Canadian federal government instructed you to track this revenue or to pass these savings along to small businesses?
Not aware of any such instructions.
You have not, just to be clear.
No.
Okay. Has the Canadian
Ms. Rempel-Garner, sorry to interrupt again, but we have the interpreters say that the mic needs to be selected. Yeah, the headset needs to be selected differently. I don't know if Madam Clerk, you want to intervene, or maybe IT can reach out. Just a second. It doesn't seem like the proper headset is selected. Which goes to your point, Mr. Massey. I see you. So maybe.
Apologies for the trouble, folks. We tested all this yesterday, and it seemed to be working then.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working now, but I'll just suspend briefly, maybe for IT. So I'll suspend for a few minutes and IT will reach out to you, Mr. Carlson.
Okay, sorry about the trouble.
I call the meeting back,
Okay.
colleagues, and we'll start anew. Ms. Rempel-Garner, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. So, Mr. Carlson, I'll just pick up where I left off. Just to clarify, the Canadian federal government has not contacted you or your company instructing you to pass along the savings on interchange fees from Visa, offered from Visa and MasterCard to small businesses. They have not contacted you to pass those savings along to Canadian small businesses. Is that correct?
Well, again, I'll just clarify. In our view, we have passed the savings along, but has the federal government contacted us on this matter? Not to my knowledge.
So earlier this week at committee, Canada's current finance minister said that she would intervene if your company did not pass these savings along. There's a story in Canada's Globe and Mail this morning that one of your board members, Mark Carney, has been in talks with Canada's Prime Minister to join the cabinet in the position of finance minister. Has he informed you or Stripe's board of these talks?
I have not discussed anything pertaining to his to these matters with him, nor do I believe has anyone on the board. So no.
Do you think that it's problematic that you are facing questioning by a Canadian parliamentary committee on the failure of your company to pass along savings from interchange fees to Canadian small businesses? the current finance minister has said that she would intervene. They have not contacted you yet. And then this morning, there's a story in the Globe and Mail that one of your board members is in talks with the prime minister to become the finance minister.
It seems very proper to me that these are completely separate issues and kept very distinct.
This year, Mr. Carney accepted a senior economic advisory role with the Liberal Party. Did your company put in place any guardrails or screens to prevent Mr. Carney from perhaps seeing or having input on any Canadian public policy decisions after that point?
We have not discussed any Canadian public policy decisions at the board level.
But I asked you if you put any screens in place, because I just have to take your word for it that that happened as a public policy maker. He also sent out a highly partisan fundraising email for the Liberal Party. Did you put in place any screens given his economic advisory role?
We have a standard conflicts policy at the board, like most companies, and conflicts have to be disclosed to our general counsel. But I'd say that as a general matter, board members tend to have political views, and lots of board members at different companies are politically active in some form. And so, this seems this doesn't seem out of the ordinary to us.
It's not out of the ordinary for one of your board members to be in talks to become Canada's prime minister after the current prime minister, finance minister, after the current finance minister said at a committee earlier this week that she would be intervening due to your company not passing along savings from interchange fees to small businesses. You don't think that there's any potential conflict that Mr. Carney would now require a screen on?
Well, like I said, he's not been involved in those discussions.
But again, have you, what assurances do we have to take your word for that? You said that he has to disclose any potential conflicts to your council. Has he disclosed any potential conflicts for you, like, say, being the senior economic advisor to the prime minister of a country in which you are significantly operating in?
I have not been privy to those discussions. I can't speak to what disclosures he's made.
So you don't know whether or not one of your senior board members that your company touted as a major boon to your board, you don't know whether or not he's disclosed any conflicts of interest, given that he now has a senior economic advisory role with the federal Liberal Party, and now there's a conflict between the current finance minister, a story in the Globe and Mail that he's about to become the finance minister, and you're not sure if he has disclosed any conflicts to your council.
I'm just not privy to those discussions. And as I said, issues pertaining to Canadian public policy just have not at any point been topics of board discussion.
Do you think maybe you should be?
So I should be which?
Do you think maybe you should be privy, given that you're sitting in front of a Canadian parliamentary committee after members of this committee have heard from small businesses across this country of their extreme displeasure that your company has elected not to pass along savings on interchange fees to them, and now one of your board members is embroiled in a potential conflict of interest? Do you think that's maybe you should call your council after this meeting and say, hey, maybe we should put a screen around this guy to make sure that there's no conflict of interest? Like, do you at least acknowledge that the optics are problematic?
Well, under the Lobbying Act, my understanding is that conflicts, are the responsibility of the board member, we trust that Mark Carney has taken all the right steps.
So I'll give you just one more chance, because I've been around a hot minute, and I know when things tend to blow up, and I have a feeling that this is going to become problematic for you. Do you have any personal reservations about not knowing whether or not one of your board members is in talks to become the finance minister of Canada after the current finance minister of Canada said that she would intervene on you not passing along savings on interchange fees to Canadian small businesses at a committee meeting this week? Do you not assess that as some sort of corporate reputational risk in the slightest?
I think maybe the sort of the difference in perspective and the disconnect here might come from the fact that the amounts of money that we're discussing are extremely small. We're talking
to
an
you.
amount.
What is small to you, Mr. Collison? Because I don't think it's going to be small to a Canadian small business. So
We're
what's
talking,
small?
We're talking. So I think this might be helpful context for all the questions.
What's small?
Two things have changed in Canada over the past year. One, because of the tax increase costs for businesses have gone up by about
So
$17.
you're
And
allowing small businesses to offset your tax burden. I understand that. That was savings defined for them, and we understand that. But you're saying it's small. What is small to a small business for you?
Okay, Madam, Ms. Rempel, MP Rempel Garner, sorry, the time is up. I'll let the witness answer, and then we'll turn it over to MP Van Bynen. Mr. Carlson, the floor is yours.
I'd say the respective amounts in question, very briefly, are there's been a tax increase because the new tax on payment processing costs of about $17 on average for a small business per year, $17 a year. And then the interchange agreement with the card networks results in a saving of about $10 per business per year. And so the net increase is about $7, but the amounts in question are $17 and $10 per business annually.
MP Van Bynen, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify the conversation and that we have an opportunity to maybe ensure that the record is correct. Now, I'm confused. You had said earlier that Stripe has not been in discussions with the Department of Finance. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
No, all I said was I'm not aware of any orders from the finance department.
My understanding is, and based on testimony at this committee earlier, that there was a direction for you to pass those savings on.
Well, I guess maybe there's a question of levels of mandate, but we obviously would comply with all legal orders, and we have not, to my knowledge, received any such order.
So to clarify then, it is possible that that conversation took place, but that you weren't engaged in it directly.
I can't speak to all of the conversations that have happened between our policy team and the government, but like I said, we have not received any such order.
There is a concern about the savings that's being directed by the department not being passed on. Businesses and nonprofits would benefit from this agreement to have the annual credit cards. With people who have credit card sales below $300,000 would substantially benefit, as mentioned earlier. Do you have any rationale for the reason why these savings should not be passed on to small businesses?
Well, for businesses that pay us for payments, all the savings have been passed on. And that's actually the significant majority of our transaction volume. And so the issue we're discussing here is if you elect to pay Stripe in kind of a blended fashion for our software products together, whether we should change our standard pricing that has been unchanged in the face of inflation and all the rest for 8 years. And this is kind of our Costco hot dog. We really try to keep the price the same, even as the functionality in the products and services that we offer improve. And we haven't changed that blended pricing for 8 years. And I hope we can keep increasing the value while still charging the same amount for many years to come.
Do you know that under the revised credit card code of conduct, small business owners also have more rights? That they must be notified in advance if a processor is not passing on the savings from the fees reduction, and that they can now switch to a different processor without penalty. And given the number of competitors in the payment processing space, do you not think this recent decision by Stripe leaves an opening for your SME customers to look elsewhere to your competitors?
You're right. It's a really complicated and competitive space, and it's only by offering the best products and services that we're going to succeed in Canada. And I'm very proud that I actually checked these numbers yesterday. More than 500 businesses in Canada elected to switch their business to Stripe just last week. But you're right; it's a precarious position, and it's only by innovating as effectively as we can that Stripe will succeed in the market. I think you're muted.
Several of your competitors, such as Moneris and Square, have committed to passing on the savings to the small businesses. Can you explain why they're able to do that and to pass those savings on, and why Stripe is not?
So again, Stripe has passed the savings on for the businesses that pay us for payments directly. And this actually gets to, I think, your question, where the traditional payments companies have sort of a different model for Stripe. They don't build all the software services that we do. we spend billions of dollars a year building all these additional software products that are not just for payments, that help you with additional things like identity verification or fraud prevention, or the very long list of other services. And because they only do the payments part, they, like us, for businesses that are just paying for payments, they pass everything straight through. And so Stripe has innovated by building these additional products and services that traditional players haven't.
So you use a tiered system, right? So that those that pay more premium pricing get to realize the savings. So it'd be helpful to know what percentage of the clientele pays the premium and what percentage does not. What's your pricing mix?
So I just want to clarify the question. So when you say pay the premium,
yeah,
you mean
you're saying that you're passing the savings on to one group of clients or clients that are paying at a certain price range and not onto the others. So I'd like to have an understanding of the mix of client base to understand the percentage of benefit that each client group gets.
The significant majority of our transaction volume in Canada is covered by this by businesses that elect to pay for the payments portion, and as a consequence have seen both the tax increase on payment processing costs, but they've also seen this benefit that we're discussing here from the SMB agreement. And so, I think if I'm understanding your question correctly, most of our transaction volume is covered by those businesses have received that benefit. Again, I think you're muted.
Yes, you are, Mr. Van Bijnen.
Somebody keeps muting me.
Definitely not me.
Okay, but so you've passed your savings on to some of your customers, but not all. And I still haven't gotten a good understanding of what that mixed base is. Is the majority of your customers getting the benefit of that savings that's being passed on?
In terms of like the mix of our different pricing models, I actually don't have the figure to hand on a kind of per business basis, but the majority of our transaction volume is covered by businesses that pay for the payments portion separately and then pay for our software products on a different basis.
But Moneris and Square have passed their savings all of their customers, and again, why hasn't that happened with Stripe?
Well, like I was trying to describe, Moneris, for example, but I don't mean to single them out. Let's just talk about the kind of the traditional, payment, the payment incumbents. They don't build these software products, and so they don't have the same challenge of trying to figure out, well, how can we build for our software products and for the payments functionality together? It's just that they have a different business model, which I'm sure works for them. And so what we're trying to do is to provide simplicity and predictability where businesses can together purchase as a bundle. But again, I just want to emphasize this point where the absolute dollars involved we're talking, I don't know if you're familiar with the term basis point being 1/100%. The amounts in question are about 2 basis points or thereabouts. And so whatever we did, it would be a minuscule change.
Yeah, but going back to the point, the earlier point from my colleague, it may seem minuscule to you, but my understanding is that this agreement will reduce interchange fees up to 27% and is expected to save small businesses around $1 billion over 5 years. It's not chump change, sir.
Unfortunately, because of the carve-outs and the limitations and all of the kind of restrictions on it, I'm here to say that at least for the Stripe portfolio of businesses, it is quite small. And again, on average for one of these businesses, they've seen a $17 increase from the tax change, and again, $10 a year is what we're talking about here.
But if it's so minuscule, why aren't you passing those savings on to small businesses?
Again, as we sort of covered, for businesses that pay for the payments directly, it all gets passed through vanilla. And then we really want to maintain the simplicity and the predictability of our blended pricing model. We think it's much better for the market for this model to exist. Stripe is one of the pioneers in developing it. It's for 8 years, I'm very proud of this. We've managed to avoid increasing the cost. And actually, this might be sound like an arcane point. It's actually getting slightly cheaper over time because the way it works is we charge 2.9% plus 30 cents for it. And of course, because of inflation, the 30 cents is becoming less valuable over time. So it's getting kind of slowly cheaper as inflation erodes it away. And even as we spend these billions of dollars developing new software products, we don't want to increase the cost.
Thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Yes, thank you, MP Van Bynen. Monsieur Savard-Tremblay, la parole est à vous.
Mr. Savard-Tremblay, over to you for 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning to the witness. Thank you for your witness testimony. I would like to ask you to start off how much, because I'd like to go in the same vein as the previous discussion. I would like to know how many small businesses that are eligible, how many of them have benefited from the redistribution of the lowering of the interchange costs.
I don't have the business counts to hand.
Avez-vous quand même un approximatif? On tient
Do you
pour
have
acquis que
an
ce sera pas
approximate
plus
number, even if it's not the exact number? I mean, we're not going to hold you liable for that. About how many?
Yeah, as I said, the majority of our transaction volume in Canada is from businesses that pay for payments separately on this, what we call interchange-based model. I'm afraid I'd be worried about getting it too wrong if I tried to estimate what fraction of businesses that is. I can say we have 900. We support 900,000 businesses in Canada. That's the total.
900 000 que vous desservez, parfait. Puis,
about
quel
900
type
businesses. So what types of businesses, just to have a sense of what lines of business these small businesses are? Of course, I'm still talking about the eligible businesses.
They cover every sector of the economy. Stripe is a very flexible platform, and since we launched in Canada just over 10 years ago, businesses have migrated because they get more functionality from Stripe than they have from the traditional providers.
Pouvez-vous me parler un petit peu plus spécifiquement?
Can you talk more specifically about the small groceries sectors as well as quickies?
Groceries aren't, traditionally where we've seen the most adoption. Stripe kind of was first designed for online businesses, and that's maybe where we're strongest. But you're right that we make Stripe available to businesses in every sector, and I don't know how many, for example, grocery businesses we have, but I'm sure there are some.
Donc certaines.
So, considering the rules on volume as well as the rules regarding eligibility, some small businesses and convenience stores fall into the category of businesses that were able to enjoy the reduction in the interchange fees, right?
Yes, as I mentioned, on average across our small business portfolio, the tax increase is about $17 per business, and the interchange agreement you're describing resulted in a saving of about $10 per business per year.
Donc, seriez-vous prêt à dire que
So could you say that if we don't have other small grocery stores and convenience stores that enjoyed this reduction in interchange fees, it's not as a result of you passing on the savings, but it's because government measures, because these measures only address very few segment of your clients?
It's true. If I'm following the question, yes, I think it is potentially true that because of the design of the agreement, Stripe's customers are less impacted by it than perhaps some other providers.
Parfait. Puis, quelles sont les implications?
So, what are the implications on developing new possibilities of electronic transfers and payments?
We think it's a very exciting time where we're seeing the development and the adoption of new payment systems around the world in places like Switzerland, Sweden, India, Brazil, Thailand, etc., where central banks are building these real-time bank-based wallets that are instant and close to free, and creating much more competition in the marketplace, creating enormous consumer benefit, and generally seeing a lot of adoption. And Stripe is very enthusiastic about this, and we would love to see more competition in the marketplace thanks to these systems, and we really support any Canadian efforts to bring that about.
Justement, votre collègue, lorsqu'il était venu
Your
témoigner,
colleague, when
dans
he
les
appeared
différentes
here, he
méthodes qui
talked
étaient
about
développées
different methods that are
pour faire
currently
des
being
employés
developed.
présentement.
Can you confirm that there are
Notamment, il nous
any
parlait du
such
paiement
methods being
par
developed?
la banque.
And he talked about
Est-ce que vous pourriez nous
payments
expliquer
by
ce
banks.
concept-là un petit
And
peu,
could you
nous dire un peu
explain this
plus en quoi
concept
ça
to us
consiste?
and clarify exactly what this is all about?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really want to be able to offer lower costs to our businesses. When we ask businesses what matters to them, this is obviously high on the list. And again, the amounts we're discussing here in this hearing are very small. As mentioned, we're talking $10, $17 per business a year. And the thing we wonder about is, well, is the way we could reduce costs by thousands of dollars a year to make kind of a meaningful structural change. And one opportunity or way we see to do that is to offer an ability to get off card rails entirely and to switch to bank-based payment rails. And so we have been working on this for the past 5 or so years, and we rolled out a product called Instant Bank Payments in the US last year. And I think this is going to be structurally much cheaper over time. It's an early product. It's US only at the moment, and we're kind of iterating and learning. But I hope we'll be able to bring this to Canada and to other markets in the years ahead and offer very meaningful cost savings to businesses.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
Thank you, Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Over to you, MP Massey, for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Coulson, for being here. I just want to clarify, where are you broadcasting from right now in terms of your testimony?
I'm in California.
Okay. The reason I asked for that is your connections to Ireland, which is a tax haven. It's in the top 10 now. Why does Stripe actually have a head office and organization in Ireland? I know that you've referred to yourself in the past as Isaac from your past with a nickname. So explain to Canadians why a so-called Canadian business is headquartered in Ireland, which is a tax haven.
Well, Isaac was an artificial intelligence system I developed when I was a teenager. But Stripe is in Ireland for 2 reasons. One, John and I grew up there, went to school there. We feel a lot of affinity for Ireland, and we wanted to build a business with one of its 2 dual headquarters in the country. The second reason is most of our customers are based outside the US, and a lot of them are in Europe, Middle East, Africa, etc. We need to have people there in order to support those businesses. And when you just look at it and say take stock of the European Union, where most of those customers are, Ireland is now the only English-speaking country in the EU. And so, given I guess the fact that Stripe is an English-speaking company, it's sort of the most logical option in Europe. And I'll just
so what's the tax difference that you have as being a so-called Canadian company but headquartered out of Ireland? What's the tax differentiation for Canadians?
I'm not a tax expert, and I probably shouldn't opine too extemporaneously, but I don't think we derive any Canadian benefit from having our dual headquarters in Ireland.
Okay, I'll follow up on that myself. But so I'm trying to understand in terms of the value for Canadians here. Explain, how Stripe really makes, I guess, businesses more competitive versus just a charge fee. Because what I've been asking for in terms of these hearings and so forth is that we see some of these interchange fees as more or less a parasite on the economy. Because you're talking about technology that you developed with Elon Musk and the investment from PayPal back in 2005. to today. So explain the innovation that's taken place and how you're saving Canadians businesses money versus that actually just really expunging off them in terms of the transfer of money versus accounts. Like, I'm really having a hard time understanding how you've invested so much money in terms of the value that we're getting for Canadian businesses. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I think, Stripe's mission, as we kind of describe it publicly, is to increase the GDP of the internet. And maybe that's a bit arcane, but the core idea that we're trying to get across is we want to help businesses increase their revenue. And because Stripe was first designed for online businesses, we think a lot about that particular context. And the simplest and the most powerful thing that we do to help online businesses increase their revenue is we help them accept more payment methods from around the world. And so most people who pay online in Sweden, for example, use a payment method called Swish. And it's not an easy thing for a Canadian small business to go and call up the Swish people and figure out how to integrate it and so on. But presumably, if you're running an online business selling to customers around the world, you want to support customers in as many markets as possible. And so Stripe makes it really easy with just a couple of lines of code, a little bit of work in an afternoon to accept customers and to accept payments from a global customer base in all the different currencies and payment methods. And
sure.
Obviously
No, thank you. Sorry, I'm just running out of time. But yeah, so very good. That's a good explanation. But in terms of like, how much does that transaction take? Like, what is the real cost for that transaction? And that sounds like old technology to me. So how is that actually, in today's terms, paying dividends?
Well, look, customers vote with their feet, and we don't get to force anyone to adopt the Stripe platform. They take stock of the 50 plus providers on the market, and they can decide if Stripe makes sense for their business or not. I will say that the vast majority of Stripe's revenue goes straight back out the door, where we are paying on behalf of the business all these other payment systems for the cost of those transactions.
Okay, so you're paying other payment systems in terms of your processing.
Correct. So the idea is you pay Stripe this, well, if you're a small business, this simple flat fee, and then we go and pay all the other payment schemes on your behalf.
That's very helpful. Can you table with us the cost of those fees? Because here's what we're trying to get at is, in terms of the economy and productivity, at least for myself, is what's the value of transitioning money from the person that's actually purchasing something to actually the payment to somebody else? It seems to me that we have in between a lot of different factors that are skimming profits and, quite frankly, are parasites on the economy and productivity. I represent workers that have to get up every single day, and that are often charged with not being productive enough in terms of what they have to do. And at the same time, we have financial transaction processes that don't really seem to be offering a lot of value, but are costing a lot in percentage-wise that don't have the same accountability.
Look, I totally understand your kind of curiosity and maybe even your skepticism here, because it's a weird and kind of messy ecosystem. I'll just make two very brief points, since I know we're limited. One is, I think it is interesting to look at mechanisms to reduce interchange costs and things that different countries have done. The thing that I think just has to be factored as one analyzes that is the ability, like, part of the main thing that those costs do is those funds mainly don't go to payment processors like Stripe. They mainly go to subsidize consumer credit issuance. And to your point about the people you represent, like, a lot of that makes it easy for them to borrow on simple terms, and they don't have to go and get a dedicated loan from the bank or something. I mean, they get credit cards, and in Europe, where I'm from, interchange is regulated, but generally speaking, consumer credit tends to be less abundantly provided. So I think there's just like a kind of a balance to be struck there. And the second thing is, and I don't want to harp on this too much, but I really think there's an opportunity here to do something around a real-time payment scheme that's kind of instant and close to free. And then we can sort of let the market adjudicate, well, if payments are too expensive in the card-based world, well, let's introduce a competitor, and we can see what happens. So I think introducing competition there would be really helpful.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Massé, and thanks, Mr. Carlson. Realizing you're joining us from California, thanks for making the time so early in the morning, so we appreciate that. Mr. Perkins, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
The questions are very helpful to have one wake up.
So is coffee. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Coulson. It is an impressive business that you've built in 14 years, but I'm curious, as the co-founder of Stripe and the CEO of Stripe, you must have been involved in the recruitment of Mark Carney to your board.
I was.
And you were aware, obviously, of all his close connections to the current Prime Minister and the current government when you recruited him.
I was not, and I'm actually not sure who the Canadian Prime Minister at the time was, but I first got to know Mark when he was Governor of the Bank of England, when he was living in the UK. And at the time, I thought of him as a British official, and our first discussions were in that context.
Well, he's in all the papers here, and if you had missed it, in the beginning of the summer, there were stories from the senior officials in the Prime Minister's office saying how disappointed they were with the current finance minister, Minister Freeland, and how she was a terrible communicator and they weren't getting their message out, so that they were trying to actively recruit him to run in a by-election to get into cabinet. You must have been aware of that. And then over the summer, when they were unsuccessful, the Liberals, they made him a special advisor to the party and really inserted him essentially as the de facto finance minister above Minister Freeland, while he still serves on your board. But yet in the fall, Minister Freeland made this great to-do about, I'm going to massively reduce the merchant fees for small businesses in Canada with this thing that you are calling minuscule and $10. During all of that discussion in the lead up to that announcement, because the current finance minister, not the next finance minister, but the current finance minister claims that they had had discussions. Did Stripe have discussions directly with the finance officials in the lead up to that announcement? Was the future finance minister, Mark Carney, involved in those discussions?
I don't know of all the discussions that may have happened between different officials at the finance department and Stripe and any consultations that might have occurred, but I can say that Mark Carney was not involved.
So the determination of your company to defy the government's requests, which your competitors have complied with, to pass on these savings, whether you think they're small or not, was made which obviously is an embarrassment to the current finance minister that she can't get you to comply. You said it's de minimis, it doesn't amount to much. In fact, in your press release, you said it's because of the goods and services tax changes. But really, you only had a one-year holiday on the goods and services tax. So, and you earlier said that, a basis point is a minor amount of money, and your press release says that this is an impact of 0.036%, and therefore, you couldn't pass it along. But that seems like, by your own words, minuscule when your business in Canada has improved by 50% in 2 years, as you claimed in your opening, that you can't afford to pass on a minuscule change and defy this Liberal Minister of Finance when you have the next Minister of Finance on your board.
So is there would you just comment on that?
Is it de minimis or not? You said it was de minimis, but it's clearly significant to you because you've said that you're not going to pass it along.
Okay, I think the issue is...
If it was irrelevant, you'd pass it along. You say, okay, I can pass on that $10, that $7, but it must be significant to you.
But the businesses that pay us for payments as kind of a dedicated payments product, as we've been discussing, we passed all that along. I think the issue at hand is really whether businesses like Stripe...
In fact, your press release says that you're not passing it along. Is your press release wrong?
I think the press release is referring to what I was about to get to next. I think the issue at hand is whether businesses like Stripe should be able to have a simple, single, stable price that's predictable for businesses and that doesn't change through time.
Yeah, it's
which, as I
predictable. You can
mentioned-
make something predictable by making it an excessively high flat rate. That's predictable. But you're the only player. Are you that inefficient? Mark Carney sits on the board of a company that is less efficient than your competitors, that you can't find a way to pass on this minuscule thing? Are you really that poor in your technology relative to your competitors that can do this? Or is it that Mark Carney is trying to undercut the current finance minister?
Mark Carney has not been involved in any of these discussions.
So when your company decided to defy the Canadian government, your board of directors never had a discussion. You've never had a discussion about defying the Canadian government on this initiative?
Our Canadian pricing has never been discussed at the board level. Our revenue in Canada is less than 10% of Stripe's global revenue. And the issues we're discussing here
shouldn't cost you much to pass it along. So why would you defy the request of the current finance minister? Wouldn't you respect that the perceived conflicts of interest, not just the real ones, but the perceived one that your board member has in being the inserted finance minister between the prime minister and the current finance minister, would say, you know what, maybe we should be careful. Since the Canadian part of our business is small and this is a minuscule amount of that business, we should comply? Or is it that you're just too greedy to try and screw Canadian small businesses, that you'll take every dollar out of them as you are an American-based company? You don't really care about the Canadian market, and neither does your board member. You would have thought your board member, Mark Carney, would have said, hey, guys, like, this doesn't matter. You shouldn't do this reputational harm to the company. Is he that detached as a board member that he doesn't actually care about what's going on in his own country?
Yeah, I actually have sort of the opposite point of view, where rather than making any of these pricing decisions on the basis of political exigencies or perceived allegiances or anything, we try to ignore the politics and just do what we think is best for
Put
the
Mark
business
Carney
that
on
we
your
serve.
board? You ignored the politics. Come on. It's unbelievable that I've sat on boards. It's unbelievable that you would make a decision against a Canadian government order with the future finance minister and the personal advisor to the Prime Minister of Canada and on economic policy, that you would make a decision to defy that government with the senior economic advisor to the Prime Minister on the board. It's just not believable. Either that is misleading, or the current board member really is indifferent. Maybe he is indifferent since he's moving Brookfield to New York to avoid Canadian taxes. So he's so indifferent to the Canadian market that he doesn't even stick his nose into that. Like, at least he could read the papers and would have probably seen this issue that he's caused, carbon tax Carney's caused for himself and caused for you. So why is it that a board member who you think is effective doesn't even have the sense at board meetings or directly with the CEO to say, why are you defying the Canadian government? I can't imagine how irresponsible that is for a board member.
Mr. Perkins, you're way out of time. I'll let the witness answer, and I'll just remind you, as I've done in the past, that this is not the floor of the House of Commons where you get rewarded for using gimmicks and calling people carbon tax Carney. I appreciate more decorum here. So I don't know if the... So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Perkins. Mr. Carlson, the floor is yours.
I can't speak to Mark and his actions. I'll just very briefly say on the small business point that the revenue we make from businesses in Canada on a kind of per business basis has declined over the past year. Any of these small business interchange changes are more than outweighed by the tax increase. And so we decided that we would just accept that. And we think it's better for businesses that even though our margins have gone down slightly, we believe in offering a stable, predictable price. And that hasn't changed, even though it's actually slightly less profitable for us than it was a year ago.
Thank you. MP Badaway, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, to be clear, I'm not going to resort to parliamentary theatrics. I am going to stick to the business at hand. And that business is, with discipline, the expectation that payment processors, which includes Stripe, pass the savings on to the businesses as expected. The federal government is closely, as you may know, monitoring the implementation of the credit card fees, the reduction of those fees, and with the strong expectation that all payment processors like Stripe will pass these savings on to small businesses, period. If you haven't heard that, you just heard it. So that I'm sure you would take with a great deal of respect and discipline and do as the government expects you to do. I may be repetitive in some of the questions I have, but with respect to the analysts that are going to be taking this information down and then in turn providing the committee with a report and then therefore establishing recommendations to the department, the minister, again, I may be repetitive to try and solidify a lot of those statements. So my first question is that you've stated publicly that Stripe would pass through all the network costs and fees, including the recent reduction in interchange fees to eligible businesses on your interchange plus pricing. I would like you to elaborate. Do you have different pricing schemes for businesses and therefore creating different tiers in your treatment of businesses? It's something Mr. Van Bynen was trying to drill down on earlier, and I want to drill down in a bit more to be very clear with that.
Yes, we have different pricing models for different categories of business.
With that, what percentage of your revenue comes from your standard pricing, and what percentage comes from the interchange plus pricing model?
I don't have those percentages to hand, but the majority of our transactions are covered by this interchange-based pricing model.
If I may ask and request if you can provide that to the committee in writing at a later date so we can actually include it within the testimony that you're providing to the analysts, it'd be much appreciated.
Understood.
To the same question, what is covered under your standard pricing and what benefits exist within the interchange plus pricing model?
It's fairly complicated because Stripe has so many different products and services, but directionally, I would say we have a lot of payments-related functionality that gets included by default in the kind of standard blended pricing. That functionality is increasing over time. Let's give you one tiny example. We have a feature called adaptive acceptance, which we use kind of machine learning to try to increase the authorization rates of transactions to help businesses grow their revenue. If you're paying the 2.9% plus 30 cents, that's included for free. If you use our interchange-based pricing, then you pay separately for that and lots of other functionality. And then on top of that, we have pure software-based products. And so, for example, Stripe Radar is a fraud prevention toolkit. It's not part of the transaction itself. It's a separate tool for managing fraud. And again, that's included for free with the sticker pricing, but one pays for it separately if you're using our interchange-based model. But in each case, there are many different products.
Just announced it's moving away from volume-based pricing and towards a flat fee for its customers. This was a decision that was a year in the making. Are you currently reviewing your pricing models, as we were just discussing, to ensure the most optimal pricing options for your customers?
We're always reviewing them to try to make sure that we're competitive in the marketplace. And I would say, I think Stripe has differentiated itself and achieved the most success primarily at the low end of the market, where we've seen the strongest traction, because traditionally those businesses have been underserved and have, the whole motivation for it. Sorry, is the audio working?
No, that's
you can hear okay?
Yeah, I can hear okay. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, just saying the whole motivation for starting Stripe in the first place was we perceived a need to serve small businesses more effectively than they had been. And so this is a really big focus for us.
Great, thank you. Last question. When your director of public policy appeared at committee, he argued that small businesses would prefer to keep their highest prices or their higher prices because they are simple and predictable. Dan Kelly, the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, welcomed the agreement and called it, I quote, an important deal for small businesses. He also said about your company, and once again I quote, it's extremely disappointing to see a big company take this approach. This means SMEs will not get the full value of the promised savings. How can you argue that small businesses would prefer to pay higher prices?
We think our pricing is very competitive relative to our competitors when you take stock of the full bundle of products and services that Stripe provides. And for example, many of these global payment methods that Stripe provides, nobody else in the Canadian market provides them. And so you're going to generate less revenue if you use an alternative or a competitor than if you use Stripe. And I think that's why more than 500 Canadian businesses switched to Stripe, again, just over the past week. We think the value equation for Stripe is much stronger, especially for a small business, than any competitor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Savard-Tremblay. La parole est à vous
Thank
pour 2
you,
minutes 30.
MP Savard-Tremblay. Over to you for two and a half minutes. Compared to Visa and MasterCard and Interact, we find it interesting because we're wondering whether you've had the same challenges with SEPA payment methods in Europe. Can you compare both situations?
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. I'm not an expert on Interac, so apologies if anything here is kind of not specific enough. But I would say SEPA is generally cheaper and more open access than Interac, and I think that enables somewhat more product innovation. And we're very excited about bringing our instant bank payments product, the thing we discussed earlier, to SEPA-based payment rails, and I think that could really help reduce costs for businesses.
Could you tell us a bit more about this SEPA model? You said it's easier, it's more open, it's cheaper. We are looking in comparison to Visa and Master on one hand and Interac on the other. And from what I understand through your message is that it would be in our best interest to learn from what's happening in Europe.
I think that's true. There's a lot of interesting and important payments innovation happening in Europe. And as I mentioned in the opening remarks, the open banking policies in some European markets, like the UK, include a mandate that businesses enable open access for sort of payment facilitation, which really helps. But SEPA is, while it's open access and very cheap, it's also kind of a low-level protocol. And in particular, and again, maybe this is a little bit arcane, it doesn't mandate an authentication flow. That is to say, it's up to the bank in each case. What do you tap on your phone, and how exactly is a payment initiated? And that's why we think these central bank-based wallets, like Twint in Switzerland or Swish in Sweden, are so compelling. They're a full package payment solution. And I think Canada pursuing something like that, a full package, instant, close to free payment solution, would be really compelling.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Massé.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massé. Over to you for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Coulson, the Conservatives seem to have a conspiracy here with regards to Mark Carney. It is an odd thing. There's no doubt about it. I've been in Parliament for over 22 years, and I think there's some merit to their questions around the relationship. But when did you actually draft Mark Carney into your operations? I actually believe that it probably was a cocktail conversation thing, that it was a good idea to bring in an elite like that, versus that of the conspiracy of the Conservatives that it's part of an operation of the Liberal Party.
I first got to know Mark 2015, 2016, thereabouts. I believe he joined the board in 2020, if my memory serves me correctly. And the main thing that we were interested in having his kind of perspective and expertise on was the evolution of the global financial system generally. When he was in the UK, he spoke a lot about open access to payment rails and central bank digital currencies and tokenized systems and things like that. And he's the only living person, or I guess maybe the only living or dead person, to have been a central bank governor in two different G8 markets. And so we thought, as we thought about what the global financial system might look like in 10 or 20 years, that he would provide a valuable perspective.
Yeah, well, this isn't Shaun of the Dead, so I'm glad he's looking at living people. But I guess this is where I'm going on this, is that I still don't see the value in terms of the interchange experience. And when was your technology that you currently have in place developed? And did it receive any subsidies or tax reductions being based or developed in Ireland or Canada. I'm just curious about that aspect because I represent, again, not only just workers and productivity, but also small and medium-sized businesses that are paying for something that I think is quite antiquated.
It's been extremely expensive to develop Stripe. I don't know what the cumulative Stripe spend is, but it's certainly more than $10 billion to develop it to the point that it's at today. And for the vast majority of its history, Stripe was not profitable. Investors were subsidizing Stripe to help cover the costs of building all the software and the functionality for these businesses. And so it's been, it has not been for most of its history.
$10 billion to just be able to transfer funds from a consumer to a product in the market.
Yes, yes is the short answer. I mean, payments is kind of a funny thing where, as you say, you think about it, you look at it and you're like, well, it's a payment, how hard could it be? And when you layer on the compliance considerations, the currency considerations, all the different payment methods in different countries, the need for fraud prevention, the importance of kind of self-serve access. So traditionally, you'd have to go to the bank and plead your case and fill out paperwork and so on. Stripe pioneered this instant enablement self-serve model where a business could just fill out the form on their computer at home and instantly go live. This was a pioneering thing that Stripe developed. All of these together are very expensive to develop. But I agree, it sounds a bit funny when you first hear it. It's like, how could it be that hard?
No, that's fair enough. I mean, this is where I want to go for the future. It's not where we were in the past, though, is looking at all these layers here, because it seems almost like a Ponzi scheme from, the citizen that wants to actually buy something, a widget, and then having to pay upwards of whatever percentage to actually get that product and just give over the money, which you could do at a market or some other place face to face. But we have all these systems and different regulations and so forth that are really inefficient in the economy for competing. That's where I want to go, is reducing costs.
But look, I agree with your basic intuition. Like, I think there are some transactions where you can kind of see it's sort of complicated. There's multiple currencies involved, different countries. It's not it's not trivial. But then there are some transactions like buying something at the farmer's market where you're like, well, why should this be that complicated? And I really support the committee's spending time just thinking about this and trying to figure out ways to simplify it and to make it cheaper for Canadians, because I think there are real opportunities there. So I agree with the thrust of your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know I'm out of time.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. MP Patser, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. When and how did you become aware that Mark Carney was going to be the special advisor to the Prime Minister on financial matters?
I learned about it in preparing for this hearing this morning.
Okay, so just the last week or two was the first you'd heard of it.
That's right.
Okay, it seems, based on the testimony I've heard from and the interactions I've heard from other colleagues, it really feels like this is being treated as if this is like the, Liberal Party campus club at the local university treatment, like he's trying to become the treasurer of the local campus club. Like, based on media reports, and this isn't just like a new media report that Mark Carney's being considered to be the finance minister of Canada or a special advisor. This has been going on for years. This is not new. And the fact that it's just kind of being glossed over as just a whatever kind of deal is a little bit offensive to this committee, but also to Canadians and Canadian businesses who have been struggling over the last number of years. So when we look at conflicts of interest, even if they're just perceived, but I think there's something maybe a little bit more substantive here than just a perception. Are you not concerned at all, based on what you've heard here today, about an apparent conflict with Mark Carney being the special advisor to the Prime Minister, as well as the prospective future finance minister of a G8 country, and he's also sitting on your board, and we're sitting here today at issue because the Government of Canada has issued to you a request to lower your fees, and Mark Carney sits on your board as a financial advisor to the Prime Minister, and your company has just kind of said, meh, no, we're not going to do it.
I think the important kind of context here is these Canadian policy matters are not issues of board discussion and never have been. And Mark has not been involved in any of these. In fact, not only has Mark not been involved in these decisions, but until very recently, I wasn't involved because the amounts in question are so small, and because we're making less profit from Canadian businesses over time because of the tax increases. This has been a very routine matter decided by our pricing teams and was not even a topic of discussion for the senior management team.
So is anybody involved in Canadian policy decisions? Like, I mean, your board doesn't do it. You just admitted that you haven't done it up until recently. So who is involved? Like, who is in charge of it? Like, who's inbox or whose junk box, I guess, did the memo go to? Like that's that's what I'm trying to figure out here. Like, where did the memo go if you didn't see it?
We have a series of internal experts that try to make these decisions. I'm actually, proud of the fact that they were willing to accept that we would make slightly less money from Canadian businesses, that our blended package would become slightly less lucrative for Stripe. But we thought we haven't changed the price in 8 years. We should not increase the prices to try to preserve a constant margin. We'll just accept slightly less profit because we think it's really important to provide that simplicity and predictability.
So when it comes to the regulatory environment here in Canada, I mean, you alluded to yourself that Mark Carney's got great experience being the governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England. That is obviously great experience for somebody to have. But you haven't tried to tap into that to try to figure out a little bit more how you could better navigate Canada's regulatory system. You haven't tried to utilize Mark Carney's knowledge on that at all?
No.
Interesting. So why did you bring him on board then?
Like I said, because of his expertise in just the evolution of the financial system generally. So for example, Mark and I had a recent discussion about the interplay between stablecoins and the interest rate paid on treasury bonds, like a kind of arcane, but maybe in certain ways important kind of macroeconomic issue. And I find Mark to be a really insightful thinker on those kinds of central bank macroeconomic topics. But we don't engage and haven't engaged on more purely political matters.
Right. But what about the small businesses, right? I mean, that's kind of what this gets to, is small businesses trying to make a go of it, right? I mean, obviously they have turned to you, they've turned to your company as a payment processor. And when you look at just the general operating system, I mean, this whole study is about the fact that costs are supposed to be passed on. Stripe has decided to not do it. And you seem to be, I don't know, oblivious to the fact that you have somebody who is deeply entrenched with the Liberal Party on your board, somebody that is tapped to be the next finance minister of this country. It's somebody who is a contender to become the next leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. And it's just kind of laissez-faire, like there's nothing wrong here, nothing to see here. So
I think your focus on businesses that are trying to make a go of it is exactly right. And I just want to be very clear, where if all businesses on Stripe are on this kind of interchange-based pricing model, those businesses, and on lots of other providers, they are on such a model. Those businesses have seen costs increase over the past year because of the kind of offsetting effects of the tax change and then the interchange change. But Stripe has protected those businesses from that increase if they use our blended pricing model, where we did not increase our costs commensurately. We also haven't increased the 30 cents in tandem with inflation. And so, Stripe is, in our estimation, even better value than it was a year ago because we're protecting businesses from these cost increases.
Okay, well, what about around the world? Like, do other countries around the world have the same fee structure as they do in Canada? Is it the same for everybody across the world, or is it a unique situation here in Canada?
It varies country to country, but our pricing constructs in Canada are roughly the same as they are in the US, for example.
But not in Ireland.
Europe has quite stringent interchange regulation broadly, which means there's Stripe doesn't really have a point of view on interchange regulation as a policy matter. I'd say if one caps interchange, you tend to get somewhat less card penetration and somewhat less consumer credit, but you get lower interchange costs. Whether that trade-off is worth it, I think has to be kind of decided on a country by country basis.
Thank you, MP Patzer. MP Turnbull, the floor is yours.
Thanks to Mr. Carlson for being here today. I wanted to start by asking you, have you yourself had any conversations with the finance team around the expectations of handing down the cost savings for the interchange fee reduction to the customers?
Deputy Minister Freeland called me some time ago, a couple of days ago, and we had a discussion about this matter, and that's the only discussion that I've had with the Canadian government.
Okay, great. And so, but there's other people in your organization, of course, that have had conversations with the finance team as this process has been unfolding for a number of months?
That's my understanding, but I don't have the details. In general, we've been somewhat kind of tangential in this, where we weren't part of the initial agreement, and so we're kind of latecomers to this whole situation.
So we had Department of Finance officials testify at the INDU committee. They said, we've spoken with the payment processes. Our expectation was that for any rate reductions, and then Ms. Rempel-Gardner interrupted them, as she sometimes tends to do, to say, did you do that with Stripe? And the finance official says, yes, or we did, absolutely. So that's the direct record in the Hansard of Parliament. So we also have had the Department of Finance quoted in a public statement on October 14th, where I'll quote, the federal government is closely monitoring the implementation of the credit card fees reduction with the strong expectation that all payment processors like Stripe will pass the savings on to small businesses. Then we had the Deputy Prime Minister here just this week, who said on the record, and I quote, we have repeatedly stated that we expect payment processors, and this includes Stripe, to pass these savings on to businesses and are prepared to take action to make sure that happens, end quote. We also had Brian Peters of Stripe, who you would know, I'm sure, and I quote his testimony here at the INDU committee, quote, we are complying with every obligation we have. We're talking about an expectation in this case. We met that expectation by passing through the reduction, end quote. So I think, what I want to clarify with you is that the expectation, although it wasn't an order, as Ms. Rempel-Gardner called it previously, it was a clear expectation that has been communicated to Stripe over and over and over again. And I think that that's been confirmed. Can you please clarify that your understanding is the same as mine, that that expectation has been clearly communicated?
Everything you just laid out is consistent with my understanding.
Okay, great. So, and then just one more thing to clarify with you. So you've said this multiple times, but I just want to make sure that I heard you correctly. The Stripe board did not make a decision, had no decision at the board level was made to not hand down cost savings to Canadian businesses. Is that correct?
Not only was there no board decision, there was also no board discussion. So in that sense, what you're saying is right. But I do just want to, if you'll forgive me for belaboring the point slightly, kind of contest the characterization somewhat, where for businesses on our interchange pricing model, all those savings have been passed on. And the issue at hand is whether a business like Stripe can maintain a blended pricing scheme where businesses are paying for a basket of products and services in Ensemble. And what we're discussing is whether is the reality where Stripe has seen its costs increase in Canada over the past year, and where despite that cost increase, we haven't increased the fees for that blended package, and of course the products and services themselves have become more extensive, and so the Canadian government could legislate or in some form regulate how blended pricing from businesses like Stripe is provided. I think that'd be worse for businesses. I mean, that's closer to how things traditionally were, is very complicated, kind of Baroque pricing schemes. We could unbundle all of this and try to price all the different components separately. I think it'd be more complicated. I think it'd be worse for businesses. And the reason so many businesses have adopted Stripe in Canada over the past decade or so is because our pricing is both simpler, but also the value is higher than it is for traditional incumbents. And so I think that'd be a step in the wrong direction.
Yeah, I mean, and you're sort of naturally going to where I wanted to drill down in my last remaining time, which was on the pricing model. So you've said very clearly that for many of your customers, and you've claimed already that most of the transaction volume in Canada, that those customers that directly pay you have already gotten the price savings. So those price savings were passed down, those interchange fee price reductions that were negotiated by the federal government with agreements have been passed down. It's with your blended pricing specifically that where we're digging into, and I think it's hard for us to understand because your business model and the structure of that pricing is not fully clear to me at this point. What I'm hearing from you is that, my tendency is to say, well, just like Mr. Van Bynen did, well, why can't you hand down the price decreases in that blended pricing structure? Like, why not? And that's what kind of makes me a little bit kind of concerned about the fact that it seems like you're not complying with what the federal government has been asking you and the clear expectation that has been communicated. So help me really really distill this for us, because this is where I think we're going to keep pushing you. I understand what you said to date, that this, like, keeping this fee structure stable has value, and I think having a bundle of services does have value, and I get that, I understand that as a business person, but also as one, as a customer, I can see how that could have value, but it still doesn't explain to me why you can't hand down a price decrease if the expectation has been clearly communicated by the federal government.
So look, I appreciate the way you laid out the question, and I think it's natural to wonder about what you just asked. So first, just on the businesses, kind of on the interchange-based pricing model, I want to clarify that yes, they've seen the interchange change. They were discussing the price reduction in certain circumstances. They've also seen the tax increase on the processing cost, and so actually their average costs have actually gone up rather than down because we're just passing everything on. And the businesses on the blended scheme have been insulated from that net increase. And then to your question as to, well, why not just change the blended price? I mean, in principle, anything is possible, of course, but the card networks change their pricing all the time. There are regular rate updates that are made to cross-border transactions or transactions for this sector, what have you. And then, of course, the blended price spans lots of different payment methods. And so we are aggregating literally hundreds of different prices together into a single stable, predictable amount. It would be extremely unfriendly and unfavorable for businesses if every time one component of that bundle changed, we were to update the sticker price. It would kind of undermine the purpose. In general, the prices that Stripe is on the receiving end of have been increasing rather than decreasing over time. And so, for example, just our total card scheme costs have increased over the past couple of years, reasonably materially. Though again, we have not changed the 2.9% plus 30 cents. Again, I don't want to falsely pretend that Stripe couldn't permanently change the blended pricing construct here but it would seem like a real departure from the core value proposition around stability that we've been providing if we're to change it to 2.89% or 2.88% or something. And if we were to go into that world where we change in response to fluctuations in the underlying costs, then it would become 2.93 and 2.95. And just it's going down a road that I think is less favorable for businesses. Again, it's closer to how things used to be, where they were fluctuating and volatile. And again, I think the reason so many businesses have switched to Stripe is because they really value the kind of the certainty and the stability that we work so hard to provide.
So I'm hearing that you think it would undermine the core value proposition of those bundled services and the very stable pricing that you've been able to provide. I get what you're saying. I don't know whether it's completely satisfactory to me, but I do get what you're saying, and I understand from your strategic business perspective that may make a lot of sense for you. And I also get that it's not just about you. The way that you're talking about it is very clearly focused on what is best for your customers, which obviously a successful business has to serve its customers well, otherwise it won't be able to compete. I want to clarify one other quick thing very clearly. You have said a number of times that because of a processing fee change, which increased, that your customers are only saving about $10. I wanted to just say that I understand that may be your perspective within your target market or within your customer base, but our numbers at the federal level suggest that based on the changes that have been made, credit card payments or companies, small businesses that have credit card payments that are processed of about $300,000 would see savings of $1,080 per year. So it's pretty significant savings there in general. That may not be the case for your particular clients, but certainly for others that are seeing those interchange fee reductions, that's a really significant amount for a small business. So I just wanted to get that on the record because I don't want people to misinterpret what you have said here, and I think it's important for the fact that the federal government has done some decent work here to lower those interchange fees that we really want to see hand down to small businesses. So, and I think you can get that from all members here today, that we all want to see, just our small businesses thrive, and they've gone through a tough time, and we want to make sure that they have the lowest possible fee structures and fees. So thanks very much for your testimony.
Merci, Monsieur Turnbull. Monsieur Généreux, la parole est à vous.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Généreux, over to you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carlson, for appearing here today. I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to figure this out. Do all the costs that you charge Canada on your pricing model, is it the same model across the world?
It's structurally similar, but the exact amounts differ per country because the underlying costs differ in every country.
Okay, à ce moment-là, j'ai compris aussi
so I equally understood that less than 10% of your business comes from Canada, and at the request of the Canadian government, and repetitively so, you refused to reduce your costs here in Canada. So why this decision? You mentioned that you were not the one who necessarily took that decision to not apply that costing system in Canada. So what is the reason, in your view, for your company's denial to do so?
So for businesses that pay us for payments directly on an interchange-based model, we pass everything through. We pass through the interchange change that you're describing. We also pass through the tax increase, the GST on payment processing costs. And then for the businesses that pay us a blended fee, which is a minority of all transactions, but for those businesses, we've insulated them from the cost increase that ensues where the interchange change is more than offset by the tax increase, and we protected those businesses from that increase.
Okay, mais ça demeure un choix.
Well, but it remains a choice, a voluntary decision on your part to not reduce costs. This is a choice Is it as a result of a lack of competition? Because you mentioned earlier that there's not a lot of competition in your line of business. Is this a reason why you said to yourself, well, no one else is going to come and change the business landscape in which we're operating, and we're able to maintain our costs because we have no other competition that is going to pressure us to reduce our prices?
I think I said, or at least I meant to say, the opposite, where we are in an extremely competitive ecosystem. There are more than 50 different payment providers in Canada. And we started from nothing in Canada just over 10 years ago. And the only reason we have any business at all is because customers are voting with their feet and deciding that Stripe is a better product and better value than the alternatives. And Stripe will only have a successful business in Canada if businesses continue to make that determination. Like we are at their mercy. Now, fortunately, more than 500 businesses in Canada chose Stripe just in the past week, deciding that Stripe offers better value than all the alternatives on offer. But we need to win their business and win their loyalty on a daily basis. We get nothing, nothing comes to us automatically.
Earlier, you talked about open banking, and you mentioned that Canada was not in tune, or at least as advanced as other countries across the world. What does Canada stand to gain by, joining the bandwagon of open banking and cryptocurrency? Do you also operate in that field?
I think Canada stands to gain better consumer experiences and lower fees by adopting some of these new real-time payment schemes and payment wallets. Today, if you just want to transfer $10 from you to your friend, that's actually a kind of clunky process in many countries, including Canada. And with these new central bank wallets, that can become instant, close to free, very straightforward. And then once those wallets exist, then they can be used for business payments as well. Again, typically with much lower fees than traditionally with cards. And so I think it creates a more competitive ecosystem. It creates better consumer experiences and it reduces fees for merchants. So I think there's a lot for society to gain. We operate a little bit in the cryptocurrency domain. Within cryptocurrency, we're most interested in what are called stable coins. So rather than the volatile prices of Bitcoin and Ethereum and these kind of special purpose tokens, we're more interested in regular currencies, the US dollar, the euro, the Canadian dollar, and how they can be put on the blockchain and made accessible in an open access way. We don't do a lot here today, but we're pretty interested in it over the coming years, and we see it potentially as another way to reduce friction, to reduce fees, and to provide broader access to businesses.
So, in as much as your new modus operandi of operating directly with the bank, which would significantly reduce the interchange costs, is it not counterintuitive of a business like yours to see its turnover reduce? Or do you see another market that you could go and maybe go and conquer and make more business? You want costs to go down, but you're not doing what government is asking you. And in your new way of doing business, you'd have potentially lower revenue. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, I think you're right. There's some risk there. But long term, we think costs for businesses should be lower rather than higher. And we like the fact that because Stripe charges on a revenue basis, our incentive is very aligned with the business. Like we only make money if the business does. Increasingly, businesses are paying us for the software services that we build, all these other products and things that help them grow and manage their revenue, rather than just paying us for the transaction. But you're right, there is a bit of risk involved for us there, but ultimately we think lower costs for businesses are just the right direction to move in. We'll figure it out. And if Stripe's revenue goes down a little bit in 1 year, well, hopefully we'll make it up in future years.
Merci, Monsieur Généreux. C'est tout le temps
Thank
que
you,
vous
Mr.
avez.
Généreux. That is it. That is all the time you had, and even slightly more. Mr. Van Bynen, over to you for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm trying to get a better understanding between the interchange pricing model and the blended pricing model. Which one is it that charges 30 cents plus 2.9%?
That's what we call the blended model.
The blended model. Okay. And what's the cost of the interchange pricing model?
There is no. The reason we think it's less friendly for small businesses is there is no single number. It's a very complicated fee schedule based on the card type and the country and the transaction category. And I mean, there are literally hundreds of factors that go into determining the price on a per transaction basis.
And which one of those two plans did you commit to reducing your prices?
Well, it's more the structure. Because in the interchange-based pricing model, we just pass everything through, then automatically, if interchange rates change, as happened in certain circumstances here, then that automatically flows through to businesses. And then the blended pricing model, we haven't changed our prices in 8 years, even as various costs have gone up. And I'm happy to say that even though our costs in Canada have gone up just over the last year, we have not increased the blended fee.
Okay, so that the blended fee again is the 2.9% plus 30 cents,
That's right.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, why would there be a percentage applied to a payment fee? Example, if it's 2.9% on $100 transactions, $2.90. Now, what is it about the cost base that makes you charge $29 for a $1,000 transaction? It's the same system utilization. It's the same transaction cost. And so how do you justify that percentage?
It's a really good and I think deep question. The main reason is when we process a transaction, we are doing kind of two things. One is we're moving the money. And as you say, the work involved in that is pretty much the same no matter what the amount is. But then secondly, we're actually writing an insurance policy. And the insurance policy is if there's something wrong with the transaction, if there's something wrong with the product or the good or the service being provided, Stripe will backstop that transaction. And if you go to your card company, you say, hey, this was deficient, I'm going to issue a chargeback or whatever, by default, that chargeback, that dispute goes to the business in question. But if the business in question can't afford it or can't refund it for some reason, then Stripe is on the hook and Stripe is underwriting that. And so Stripe's liabilities actually scale linearly with the transaction amount. And that's the reason for the percentage fee.
So it's the transaction risk in itself. Okay.
Correct.
So give me a better understanding of the ecosystem. I'm concerned in part about the market dominance of Interac, Moneris, and Visa. What is Stripe's share of that market?
We don't have exact numbers, but single-digit percent would be my guess. If I just had to make up a number, I'm going to say 5% of Canadian transactions, but it might be meaningfully lower.
And in terms of making choices between Stripe and the market, the dominant market players, what mechanisms are there in terms of making comparisons so that the merchants or the users can make a quick and a clear decision as to which service provider is more beneficial to them, or how complicated is that process?
I mean, there's a code of conduct that Stripe is an adherent to that mandates, some elements of standardized pricing, display, and so on. I would say traditionally it's been a very complicated process. It's been very opaque. And I remember when we were trying to set up our first, what they call merchant account, we found it very difficult to figure out, okay, but how much would this cost? And that's why we're so sort of emotionally attached to this idea of simple, transparent, blended pricing that's there on the website and doesn't change with time and so forth. It tends to be very complicated and difficult to model these costs.
So what could the government do to expedite or to make it easier for businesses to get the decision that's best for them?
It's a good question. I think look, I think the measures around transparency are broadly good. And this is true in lots of sectors, whether it's hospitals and healthcare or payments. I think having to put your prices on the website is good for competition, and it's good for small businesses. The biggest thing, though, and I apologize if I seem repetitive here, I think is introducing competition to the marketplace, where there's just like natural network effects in card schemes, whether it's Interac or Visa or what have you, that I think make it difficult for the free market to operate the way it might naturally in other spaces. And so I think introducing competing payment schemes is probably the single biggest thing that can be done to. I mean, it might not make things simpler for small businesses because now there's another option, on the market. But I think it would over time make things cheaper, and I think ultimately making them cheaper is probably even more important than making them simple. And then it's the job of companies like Stripe to try to package all this together in a way that's hopefully transparent and simple and clear for the businesses in question.
We had.
Thank you, MP Van Bynen. You're over your time. Je passerai maintenant la parole à Monsieur Savard-Tremblay.
I'll turn it over to Mr. Savard-Tremblay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I'd like us to carry on from where we stopped earlier concerning Europe. If we look at the reality in Europe right now, there's a regulation called the Directive on Payment Services in Europe, and this imposes on banks to open the system to authorized third parties. And it's the operation programming interface. So in your view, since you have business in Europe, does this encourage competition or improve competition in your experience?
I think it does. And in general, I think it's interesting where the technology sector in the US is generally much more vibrant than the technology sector in Europe. And of course, Canada too has seen some amazing companies like Shopify be built here. Shopify is bigger than any technology company that's been started in Europe over the last 20 or 30 years. However, in fintech narrowly, Europe is actually somewhat more dynamic than North America, and I think that's in part because Europe has created several of these pro-competition policies.
Well, we know that the European directive contains all sorts of measures, constrains banks to provide non-discriminatory access to the systems for fintech companies, and also forbids hidden costs as well as anti-competitive behavior. And this opened up traditional banks on all sorts of transactions and payments. And I'll ask you maybe a rhetorical question because I'm asking already with an answer in mind. Does such a thing exist in Canada? And is it a pity that it doesn't exist, if of course it doesn't exist?
I think it does not exist to my knowledge, and I think that steps in that direction would be really beneficial in the Canadian ecosystem, and Stripe would be excited to support them.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur Massé, la parole est à vous.
Thank you. Mr. Massé, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What is the compensation package for a board member at Stripe?
I don't know those numbers off the top of my head.
Oh, okay, so you actively recruit board members, but you don't know what their benefit is. Is there financial as well as other incentives for board members, or is it a non-charity giving up your time status?
No, we pay our board members, and our general counsel benchmarks with other companies and tries to figure out what sensible amounts are.
A sensible amount. So what's the ballpark of that sensible amount?
Okay, I really don't want to quote numbers off the top of my head out of fear of being wrong, but we can try to furnish some averages or something in our follow-up materials.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to have those materials presented to our committee later. Does Stripe take advantage of the corporate tax deductions for alcohol, entertainment, and tickets for the 50 to 100% that's available in Canada? Does Stripe take advantage of those tax measures?
I can't state definitively, but not to my knowledge. But I could be incorrect in that.
Does Stripe actually have tickets for any sports venue or boxes or corporate venues?
I'll be not to my knowledge, and I'll be very upset if so.
Okay, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Here's because it goes back to my original questioning here is I'm still not finding the value for Canadians and others to pay in this system of corporate expenditures and then cost for actually transferring funds to actually pay for items. And I think that's what the committee here at the end of the day, as I finish, Mr. Chair, is where I'm at, is that it seems that this whole system is cooked in a way that really doesn't offer much productivity for Canadian economic development, nor consumers, nor businesses. And again, the Stripe technology that's being used right now in the upwards of $10 billion to transfer funds is quite suspect in terms of the value, in terms of what returns. And I'll finish with this. It's quite convenient when you look at this board of directors and what the Conservatives raise as Mark Carney is that usual suspects end up on these types of boards and systems that are in place that cost us much in the economy. So I appreciate you, Mr. Coulson, for coming on and presenting the Stripe case here today, but I really don't find much value with regards to the cost of Canadian businesses paying for the services and products. And that's you're occupying your space in your market, which is totally dysfunctional in my opinion.
John and I have been working on Stripe for 14 years, and I'm feeling rueful that my attempt to describe Stripe's value did not compel you, and my marketing credentials will, I suppose, perhaps be revoked. But if you ever want to chat more about what we do, I'd be happy to attempt to describe and convince you.
I don't think it's you, Mr. Coulson. I think it's a systemic thing here. So, you've taken advantage of a space in the market system that has not had government regulation or has not occupied a space to actually protect Canadian consumers and so forth. And you've done a service that actually is, market value because you're here for a reason. So it's not on you and it's not on Stripe. It's on our economic system of actually transferring funds in a virtual way versus out of the physical way that is actually creating the system problem we have, in my opinion. But thank you. It's not your fault. You're just part of what's taking place. There's a false economy here, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Massé. But one could argue, though, that it does give access to a much bigger market to Canadian businesses. So I think there's no doubt that it provides value to businesses. The question is, are the reduction in fees passed along to small businesses? That's the gist of why we're here today. But definitely for small businesses to have access to a worldwide market does provide value, in my opinion, at least. Mr. Perkins, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, are you aware that on November 25th, this committee passed a motion, what's called a documents production motion in the Canadian Parliament to produce financials of Stripe that we would see in camera. They would not be in public. As of today, my understanding is we haven't received this. Can you update the committee on the progress of that?
Yeah, I discussed this with the team yesterday, and I know they're actively working on this and expect to have those materials to you quite soon. And furthermore, even though my understanding is we're not obligated to provide insight into Stripe's global financials, we're only obligated to provide insight into Stripe's Canadian subsidiary. In the spirit of being helpful, we are going to share some materials there as well, because we want you all to have an accurate picture.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing those documents because, Mr. Chair, if I recall on the motion, once we have them, we only have 30 days to examine them, so we'll have to figure out how to do that on the parliamentary break. So I think I've heard you, Mr. Collins, refer a couple times to the increased cost. Your press release talks about the increased costs of the GST, but it's not really an increased cost, is it? Because you were paying the GST, and it was a less than 1 year period where you weren't with the other services providers because of the court action of some of the banks, and then the Government of Canada and Revenue Canada backfilled. So you actually are still paying the tax that you were paying all along with a less than 1 year sort of holiday. So I'm having trouble understanding how the tax that you historically have been paying would be the thing that keeps you from passing on the savings that the government claims they're going to force folks to do. And I take it, I'll leave that at that question right now and then come back to my second one.
Sure. My comment on the tax is simply that just our total costs across Canadian businesses have increased rather than decreased over the last year. On the blended system generally, it's not about the taxes specifically. It's this idea that we want to be able to provide a bundle of services of increasing value over time at slightly decreasing cost as inflation erodes the 30 cents. And we just think it's important to be able to provide that simplicity and predictability for businesses.
Thank you. You also referred to the fact, I think, to a question from, I think it was MP Turnbull, that you had conversations quite recently with Minister Freeland about this. Did you commit to Minister Freeland that you would reduce the costs, or was that the subject?
We discussed the costs, and I described Stripe's approach here and why we believe so strongly in the importance and the business friendliness of our blended payment scheme, and I tried to describe it in approximately the same terms I've described it today.
Mr. Chair, earlier in this week, as we know, we had the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Industry here, and the Minister of Industry gave a very passionate presentation of how he would like Bill C-27 passed as a Christmas present for him and for Canadians before Christmas. And in the spirit of Christmas, in the spirit of the holidays, I would like to suggest a way through this and to help the minister along. So I would like to seek unanimous consent to pass C-27 with all amendments proposed by the opposition parties and the government today.
I knew you would come up with a very reasonable proposition, Mr. Perkins, to get us through this. Yes, I see we don't have unanimous consent. Shocking.
I will give a call to Minister Champagne and tell him that his parliamentary secretary said no to passing the bill before Christmas. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that, Mr. Perkins, and I will relay the message. Mr. I'll relay it. You'll relay it yourself, yeah. Okay. I see both the minister and Mr. Perkins are very optimistic in what they can achieve. I don't know if anyone wants to go. We're nearing the end of this meeting, so this would conclude the meeting for us. I want to thank you, Mr. Carlson, for joining us so early. We see behind you that the
starting to get light.
Yeah, on the West Coast. But thanks for joining us. We appreciate your testimony.
Well, and look, let me just say that even though maybe we have some differences of point of view on the optimal economic models and different categories and so on, I understand that for all of you, the questions come from the vantage point and the perspective of wanting to improve things for businesses generally, and especially for small businesses in particular. And just Stripe very much shares that value, and so just I appreciate your focus on the issues, and perhaps there'll be areas we can work together in the future, whether it's on real-time payments or anything else. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. And it dawned upon me listening to your testimony that perhaps not everyone pays as much attention to Canadian political gossip in the Globe and Mail as we do here on the Hill. But Mr. Van Bynen, I see your hand is up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and getting to that conversation. I know that with the federal government, we have an ethics commissioner that determines what's appropriate and inappropriate behavior for members of parliament. And just wanted to clarify with Mr. Coulson to confirm as to whether or not his corporation has a code of conduct for directors and a commissioner in charge of making sure that there's appropriate behavior for the directors and members of the board.
We require that board members disclose conflict of interest to the general counsel.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So that's the very last question of this year. And thank you again, Mr. Carlson. Thank you, colleagues. As you know, Monday will be canceled because it's the fall economic statement. So this is our last meeting before we adjourn for the holidays. I want to wish all members Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays,
Merry Christmas.
Happy Hanukkah. And I look forward to some extent to seeing you in the new year. Have a good one. Take care. Meeting
Thank you,
adjourned.
folks.